And welcome to the show. Start out a little Beatles on top of Abbey Road Studios or Twickenham Studios. Uh, Sarah's getting a Amber Alert. The show is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, and today my guest is Dr. Sarah Durand of the Natural Science Department, who's going to talk a little bit about the North Henry Street Salt Marsh Restoration Project, which has recently received $1.3 million in funding from the Newtown Creek Environmental Benefits Fund. Welcome, Sarah.
Good to be here. I'm sorry for that interruption.
Poor
Quite a surprise.
Sarah's going through a lot today. Never been on Skype and things like that. But why don't we start by giving you an opportunity to talk about yourself. Sarah, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your studies, all those things that happened to you before LaGuardia.
Okay, I'll try to do that as briefly as possible. So when I came to LaGuardia, I was doing work tracing pathways, neural pathways in the brains of birds that learn their vocalizations through social experience. Very different from what I ended up doing. And so for a while, I did some collaboration with little zebra finches with a faculty member at Hunter College. And then I realized, well, LaGuardia's not quite the place to set up a finch colony. And hey, I'm in an institution that doesn't have an environmental science program. And here, the experience that got me so excited about biology was my visits in my childhood to the shoreline to explore the meeting of sand and ocean, of wetland mudflats.
Which shoreline?
My parents were theater people and they would do summer stock. So I was on the shoreline of Massachusetts and New Hampshire and down in New Jersey. So I saw a lot of shorelines while my parents were doing summer theater and took me along because these summer theaters are in beautiful locations. So I saw some of the nicest shorelines. And there I discovered this wonderful community of life that I had no idea existed. And I would take my red bucket and fill it up with my pets for the night. And my first experience with this activity was a rather sad one that left quite a strong impression. The realization that you don't leave your pets overnight in a bucket of water without tending to it. So since that experience, I became interested in what living things require to survive, and thus began my engagement with the natural world. So I was a marine biology major as an undergraduate, and then because of my work doing a master's project with a marine station run by the University of Pennsylvania, I got very interested in the behavior of these shorebirds as they work together to defend a shoreline from other birds. They did just what they do on their mated territories, and I wrote a little paper about that. And I was able to combine my interest in intertidal animals, the animals that live between the high tide and low tide, and the birds. And then I got diverted into bird brains for a while, and that was my doctoral work and postdoc. And then, as I was saying, I came back to my love of the marine and estuarine environment upon my arrival at LaGuardia and interest in setting up an environmental science program that took students out into their local community. And in our local community happens to be an estuary, Newtown Creek, that runs right up behind the C building. And if you go up to the second or third floor when we finally all get back into campus, you can look out and you're looking across to the shoreline of Brooklyn. You can see the DEP, Department of Environmental Preservation Water Treatment Plant, a site where we've been doing a lot of work in habitat restoration. And we are sitting, our campus is sitting on what was once beautiful hundreds of acres of tidal salt marsh with waving grasses, visited by thousands of birds. And the aquatic creatures from the deep, the horseshoe crabs, the fish would swim in with the tides twice every day, and the birds would be there to greet them. And so we're sitting on what was once wetland habitat, and then all that habitat is got built up, filled in, built on. The waterway got walled in, and it became a center of industry, our estuary behind the C building. And Newtown Creek, the history of Newtown Creek, the industrial history, is incredible and well documented at LaGuardia Archives. Center of the oil and gas industry. Standard Oil had a big operation here. So oil and gas and fossil fuels, this was the center. And no wonder it's now been designated a Superfund site. And some of the potentially responsible parties include ExxonMobil and National Grid and Chevron Texaco, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the story in a nutshell.
Sarah, why did you come to LaGuardia as far as to teach here? How did that happen?
Well, I wanted to be in New York City. My parents were here, and they were getting older, and I wanted to support them. And I had a love of City University. Although I went to University of Pennsylvania and did a BA and MA there, and that was the institution that had the Marine Science Institute, where I studied the birds along the shoreline, studied their foraging habitats, their territoriality, and then ended up in a local institution, Institute of Molecular and Behavioral Neuroscience at Rutgers. So, and then I went down to DC to do a postdoc looking at the brains of parrots, of all things. But I wanted to come back. I wanted to teach at City University. I had taken a couple courses at City College after I graduated with the BA-MA, and before I did the graduate work at the Institute of Animal Behaviors and Center for Molecular and Behavioral Neuroscience. That was all one thing. One institution became another. After I was done with all that, I thought I want to come back to City University, where I'd taken some courses before graduate school, which had actually opened my eyes to some of the interesting questions of neurobiology. When is a graduate student into neurobiology? And gave up for a while the more ecological studies. I was very happy with the whole idea of a public institution and the communities it served. So between wanting to be in the city and appreciating City University for what it gave the city and for what it had given me individually, turns out there was a position open at LaGuardia, and there I landed.
What year was that?
2004.
Okay. Wondering, because that's about the time I was kind of coming back as an adjunct and met you and have known you ever since. You kind of already began touching on your interests at the college and working with students in the environment, but you want to talk a little bit about some of the things you've done at the college, as, upon getting here and beginning your work as a faculty member in Natural Science Department.
Yeah, well, when I proposed the idea of an environmental science program, both Gail Mello, then President Gail Mello, and Paul Arcario were very interested, now Provost, were very interested in that idea. And there was at that time an effort there was a grant being written to expand the science opportunities at the college. And this was also the time when we were preparing as a natural science department to split off of the applied science aspect of our work, which is now health sciences, a separate department. So we separated from health science and had a grant funded that allowed us to develop two new programs, biology and environmental science. So the little blurb I wrote for the grant proposal that was funded then demanded a group of us together as colleagues develop a program that offered ecology, environmental science, geographic information systems, and courses that could well be integrated into existing general biology and microbiology courses. And we also had Steve Lang, Professor Lang in social science, joined this group who developed the program, and he developed a course in, essentially a sister course to urban environmental science, or urban sociology, he called it. Environmental sociology, that's what he called it. Environmental sociology has morphed into several different names, but that was the original name. So essentially looking at the urban environment from an environmental perspective. So we had 4 courses, one new one in social science, and then 3 new natural science courses. A new program in geographic information systems that has allowed students to go on in this area. And we have right now someone who studied with Dr. Porter Morgan, who came in 2 years later to both direct the program and teach geographic information systems. One of her students is now getting his certificate in this, in geographic information systems, GIS. And we have students who have gone into all kinds of different aspects of environmental science. So it has been a successful program. It has spawned sister projects, field projects that are grant driven. It is the origin of President's Society Environment. Many wonderful initiatives have developed from the environmental science program.
When did you start working with, or even started thinking about this idea of having something to do with the Newtown Creek?
So Steve Lang, Professor Lang, was a member of the Newtown Creek Alliance. He came into the college with a background in the shellfish industry and was always interested in waterways and had grown up on Long Island. So I learned about the Newtown Creek. I became aware of Newtown Creek through Professor Lang. I didn't even know there was water behind our college. And so that was a wonderful discovery. And then that's because, this is the problem with the Newtown Creek right now. The industries that developed along its shoreline put up walls and essentially separated the community from their estuary. And you could walk along 47th Avenue and not know there's a waterway on the other side of a concrete wall. So as I was meeting members of the community engaged with the creek through Dr. Lang, President Mello announced to us that, there is a wonderful initiative, a potential initiative that you could exploit. The communities of Long Island City and Greenpoint have been awarded an environmental benefits grant from the state for past egregious actions against the Clean Water Act committed by the DEP, the old water treatment plant that has since been renovated, wasn't too kind on local community residents in the way of what was dumped into the water and emitted into the air. And as a consequence of long-suffering communities next to the water treatment plant, the state said, hey, we have some money for you. If you come up with proposals, good environmental projects, we'd like to see them funded. And then began a year of community visioning, and we all would gather, and I would take students to meet in the visitor center of the Department of Environmental Protection, one of the buildings in the new water treatment plant there in Greenpoint. And a list of projects were developed and presented for community vote. We had a voting polling station in Long Island City, one in Greenpoint. Local papers advertised the fact that there were these an opportunity to vote and listed the projects people could vote on. And lo and behold, we got $500,000 to restore some of that lost salt marsh grassland habitat, the intertidal wetlands that LaGuardia buildings are, well, where LaGuardia buildings are now standing. That was the habitat long gone from the shores of Newtown Creek. So our proposal was to use existing bulkheads to hang basins of these grasses. That was plan one, and it has been so far developing. And so that was the first project, to use the bulkheads themselves as a foundation for a lost wetland community. And I think when you went with us on that boat ride back in 2017, that's what you saw along the bulkhead of the water treatment plant over on the Greenpoint side. You saw these basins of salt marsh grasses, cordgrass, the same grass that once spread from the shores of Newtown Creek into Long Island, Western Long Island City, and into northern Brooklyn, Greenpoint. So we're bringing them back. That was the first effort that succeeded, and the state was happy with the success. The DEC is the state organization working through the Attorney General's office, the state Attorney General, but the DEC was the agency that was overseeing these projects and monitoring whether or not they were successful.
So when you say DEC, I'm guessing what? Department of Environmental Conservation?
That's it.
Right.
So the state agency is the Department of Environmental Conservation, and the city agency, the municipal environmental agency, Department of Environmental Protection.
Well, you've already referred to the fact that I took a little boat ride with you, my wife and I, and of course I'm always I struggle sharing my work with folks for whatever reasons. I'm a bad share, but for today we're going to try to recreate that boat ride as our engineer, Mr. Pope, Christopher Pope, is going to play the PowerPoint, and he's going to take us through click by click. So as Chris goes through, you and I will talk, and if you need him to stop at a particular image, we can say so. But so here we are getting on the boat. That may be my wife on the right. I didn't recognize her at first, but she has long blonde hair.
That's her then.
It may be. It may be. Okay, Chris.
And this is Carter Kraft. Carter Kraft is a partner. This is how things worked out. Carter Kraft, who is the captain on this renovated police patrol boat called the Blue Classroom. They take out classes of students. They've done wonderful work with this little boat. And he was appointed project manager on this so-called bulkhead greening project I was just describing, where our effort is to use the bulkhead as support for basins of lost grasses. He was appointed by the DEC's and the City Parks Foundation to work with me and students to see this project through. He's an amazing guy. He was one of the founders of the Metropolitan Waterfront Alliance, now the Waterfront Alliance, and he's a liaison between the city and the Netherlands embassy. And of course, the Netherlands is a country that has a lot of issues about water and shoreline because they're below the
sea level.
Sea level, right? So
right, they have canals and. Okay, Chris, let's keep going. We'll tell you when to stop. So is that one of the? Wait a minute, go back, Chris. So is that one of your?
So
that
those
shows
are
the grass growing.
That's right. So there is the nature walk of the DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, the city agency. They built this wonderful access point for the public as an extension of the water treatment plant. And now that nature walk has been extended further, and it takes you essentially through the history of the ecosystem that was lost here, the intertidal ecosystem, and makes reference to the history of the peoples who used to live here and sustained and monitored, lived with, benefited from this environment, the Algonquin Lenape people. So
Okay.
that's the bulkhead with the basins.
Okay, Chris, let's keep going and just a little farther back. Next. Again, the same.
Same. Now
A
you're
little
closer in.
closer. Okay, so these are one of these like metal recovery
Yeah, I think
companies.
that's some. There are a few of them. Yeah, recycling companies. There's one, Alaco, right, right, right next to the nature walk on the Greenpoint side. This is, in fact, it's a wonderful thing. If we can bring in cars, you see them crushing the cars. Then there's another area where you see car parts. And then there's another area where you see just massive mounds of metal dust, which is over on the right. So they're doing amazing work here in recycling. Unfortunately, sometimes some of that metal dust from our crushed ancient cars does make its
Into
way
the
onto the
water. I
water.
think, yeah, if you click a few more, I think I tried to take a shot. So
There
there's
they
the
is.
pile of metal. And then if you click again, I was trying to capture the little flakes of metal that float. Maybe you can see a little bit there that float in the water
That's it.
as a result of
And
the
all
wind
that
blowing.
stuff is settling down eventually as a carpet of metal at
Right.
the bottom of the creek. So we got to work with Sims and get a little better system here. I noticed they put up a big spray gun, but its activity is moderate and spotty at best. Now you're seeing all the recycled plastic waste, and they have a good guardrail for that. So you see this massive barge with piles of single-use plastic, which we've all got to stop using, folks. We've got to stop. We've got to not participate in this. But there it all is. And occasionally, yeah, some of this material will, and a strong wind will make it over the barrier. But this is much better contained. And this
Yeah.
site is directly opposite the nature walk. So you can watch all these operations in process as you visit the intertidal steps of the nature walk at the treatment plant.
All right, let's keep going. So these are just like I don't know what I go back a second. I don't know what was on that paper, whether he was listing high tide, low tide.
I imagine.
That's me being the the whatever you want to call me, documentary style, capturing details. Next shot, Chris. That's my wife on the right, and I don't know who that was on the left. Somebody else who was with us that day, I think.
Yes, I think he's an artist from Greenpoint who was a volunteer at the North Brooklyn Community Boathouse. Also a wonderful place.
Yeah, I think we have some shots of that. There are the two of you.
Yeah.
My wife had a great time, by the way.
Wonderful.
Okay, so here, I don't know what happened. I see there's something that's hanging in the water there.
Indeed. So the basins you saw earlier are sitting on an I-beam. Here's one that is now suspended from a huge cleat. This bulkhead belongs to the former Marine Transfer Station. Inside, there are ramps that lead to this huge open space. Barges would be brought into this Marine Transfer Station. The garbage trucks would dump the garbage onto the barges. The barges would be towed back out. You know what would happen to that material? Be towed out into the ocean. And yes, and this went on for decades. So now, wonderfully, it's wonderful final story. This is now going to become a composting center. I just found this out. They're going to be setting this up in the next month. So, and it's been converted to offices of the Department of Sanitation. But out front, it's going to be a center for residents to bring food waste, and composting will take place here. And then that compost can be used for community gardens, for parks, etc.
Okay, let's keep going. I took a few shots of this because I think I don't know what I was trying to do. Maybe I was trying to create one of my panoramas that I always do.
But this little...
But then, again, going back, that it looks like the cleat is holding on to something, though.
That's right. So
go back one more, Chris. Yeah, that one there. See, I think.
And now the tide has completely covered the grasses. And these are amazing, no other vegetation has these adaptations that allow it to be completely covered with salt water and then re-exposed and continue on photosynthesizing, living just fine. These grasses not only can excrete salt from their leaves, but they can transport oxygen to their roots. Amazing vegetation. This little inlet, which is has as its west shore this marine transfer station. This is the site where that 1.2 million is going to be used to develop an intertidal salt marsh, the real thing.
Yeah.
Not little basins hanging off the bulkheads, but the real thing.
Hey, by the way, it's 1:29. The show is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez. My guest today is Dr. Sarah Durand from the Natural Science Department, who is talking about the North Henry Street Salt Marsh Restoration Project, which recently received $1.3 million in funding for the Newtown Creek Environmental Benefits Fund. There's my wife again on deck. Who's this group here? Are these volunteers?
Well, I think these are some of our LaGuardia students as I try to magnify my screen. The wonderful thing about the grant, the original grant for restoring the bulkhead, provided us with student stipend support. So every year, although we fell to 2 last year, we've had from 3 to 5 students, LaGuardia students, helping us to do this work and to learn as they help mount basins and float grass rafts about the community of life that they are helping to restore. And so it's been a wonderful source of student engagement. Of course, many of these students are environmental science majors, but we have also had folks from engineering join us. And a very interesting story, the 2015 intern from engineering turned out to be the project manager for McLaren Engineering of a project they were collaborating with in 2019. So as I was saying, this has been an incubator for not only habitat restoration, but for starting our students onto careers in environmental science.
I'm sure that's going to make President Adams happy. So here we stopped and you were doing some sort of activity with basins and things.
Yes. So now you are seeing the foundation of a lot of initiatives that then flowered in the next few years. So we're standing on what is called the Living Dock. And there we see Willis Elkins, Executive Director of the Newtown Creek Alliance, who with colleagues built that Living Dock, again with an environmental benefits grant. And that dock is called Living because they have cavities in it where you insert a crate of grass or of shells, like oyster shells, and allow a little community to develop. And we have now adopted that idea to float some of our grasses. So we have grass rafts and grass islands, something that you didn't see back in 2017 because they only started the following year.
Okay, let's keep going, Chris. Just another shot. So that's just you doing that work, the interns again.
And there,
let's stop
when you pull out these crates, and they are full of life. So hanging out in the roots that extend from the grasses and hanging out amongst the shells in the crates are little, shrimp, skittlefish, blackfish, little crabs.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think if you go forward, Chris, there's a shot of you holding a crab in the living island. We're looking at all the living.
There's a flower. Okay, we're looking at the flowers of one of the grasses growing in the crates. So those little flowers are wind pollinated. What we're doing now with the grass rafts is we have the Spartina alterniflora. This is the cordgrass, whose flowers you see here, that the tidal marsh grass is in the middle. And then on platforms on either side, we are going to have a insect and bird pollinated vegetation, essentially the upland vegetation, high marsh vegetation that was also lost. So these little floating installations offer a number of benefits that we couldn't get from just suspending basins of the marsh grass themselves.
All right, let's keep going, Chris. There's a better shot of you holding the flower and pulling those things out.
Yeah, there they
A,
are.
a lot of the crates. But somewhere along, we're going to see in a little bit you holding. My wife loved this. She's nature girl.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, you both have to come back and
Yeah.
join us.
Well, now that I'm going to share these pictures with you, I can come back and take more. Okay, there it is. I think you're holding. Here. There's a few shots of you holding
Yes. What
things that are
could
alive.
Yeah. So the young, the juveniles of many invertebrates as well as fish hang out as protection in the roots that extend from the grasses in the crates. So you get a whole little community of very small representatives of the life in the along the creek. And the wonderful thing is this is even with a super fund, you give life a little bit, you support it in a small way, and it just explodes. So in these days of sadness where we see a lot of the destruction of our biosphere, what we're seeing on the creek is how small acts can have constructive ripples throughout an ecosystem. Because now, with these small juvenile forms of our community, of course, fish and birds follow them. So you're really supporting many levels, trophic levels. Once you establish the grasses, all the animals follow.
And that's something that's happened with the pandemic, that there's been less fossil fuel usage. So all kinds of life has
It's
come
true.
back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we get
There
closer and
is.
closer.
That's a little mud crab, yeah. But
Yeah.
there's blue crab in there, green crab, at least 3 species of crab in the creek. Yeah,
I
very tiny.
don't
And
know
there
why
it
it took it.
goes.
Yeah, up onto the deck.
Yeah, but then they find their way off very quickly.
Okay.
There's Carter Craft again at
Yeah,
the.
you hanging with him.
Yeah. He also teaches at
Here you're
craft.
pointing at something, and I don't know what it is. Was it something growing on the roof or something?
I wonder what
Well,
this is the site of an oil seepage, and but I don't know what I'm
okay. Yeah, it was
pointing
so
to
long
there.
ago.
Yeah.
Thought I'd just stop, and if you see anything else of interest, again
Well,
you were pointing.
we're pointing to the Queen side, and as of a month ago, we have developed a plan to work with waste management, which has a bulkhead just north of the Greenpoint Avenue Bridge. So we're finally going to get a 26. We've got 26 basins ready to go, like the ones you saw on the bulkhead at the wastewater treatment plant, the nature walk there.
Yeah.
Um, we're going to line them along the bulkhead of Long Island City.
Okay. You're just showing some trucks coming in with stuff, and
Yeah, and you can see how sterile these bulkheads are. That's
yeah,
like sheet metal or sheet pile bulkhead.
right.
And yeah, it's a tragedy. This could be a site so rich in life.
Well, there's a great book, and you probably know it, Manhattan, which
Oh, wonderful.
kind of shows what it looked like before Europeans showed up and
Yeah, Manhattan. Yeah.
turned it into what it is now.
Yes.
And there's
And
I think that's the last shot, by the way.
that's our little ecology center. That's the little, and it's now that whole site is being renovated, so that has been moved somewhere else. But that's where we could bring classes in to look at we set up a tank in there. It's on the left, right underneath the window. There's a long tank. It's like a touch tank extending from the back of the container at the window forward. And in there we had, you can just see the little grasses peeping up. And essentially we had a mini installation of a shoreline with the high marsh grasses at the back descending down into water that we were aerating, unlike my childhood bucket water that lost oxygen and everybody died. But we had an aeration system when we brought in the life of the creek. And so classes from local high schools and elementary schools, junior high, they all came by. And the Newtown Creek Alliance, the Boat Club, and LaGuardia participated in educational activities out of this little ecology center.
Nice. So, okay, so I think this is the end of the PowerPoint, Chris. What you shared with Chris as well through Google is some images which will help explain what you're going to do with this 1.3 million that you've gotten through the Newtown Creek Environmental Benefits Fund. So Chris is going to show that. So you want to talk about these pictures a little bit?
Yeah, let's see. If we can shift that yes, if we can zoom out. Okay, so down at the lower right of the screen, we're seeing the ramp where garbage trucks used to drive up and dump garbage into the cavities of the marine transfer station, which is just out of view below the frame there.
Yeah.
And so we are, yeah, very nice. The little grass tidal marsh with its upland vegetation is going to be at the head of the inlet that has the marine transfer station as its west shore. And then on the other side is Whale Creek and the Nature Walk. So, and what it looks like, we're now that gray area. If you look at the green area, and then, yeah, that gray area that looks like Boulder, it looks like we're going to have the option to extend upland vegetation along that gray boulder-like riprap area. And where you see all at the top, these empty containers and such, this is another recycling plant called Alaco. And we have a good relationship with them. In fact, they're going to be providing some of the sand and fill that is going to be the foundation of developing this salt marsh. So all told, a very nice arrangement. And the funds for this project, ironically, came from the original grant money that President Mello told us about. Some of the projects that were proposed and voted on never came to anything. So they looked at proposals of projects that had been working, and they were happy to provide the Newtown Creek Alliance and LaGuardia with the money to actually produce, realize, make happen this proposal, because we were successful with smaller versions of habitat restoration. So the success in getting funding for this proposal is because these earlier projects were successful, the floating wetlands and the suspended basins.
I think Chris is trying to figure out what to do, where to go next as far as an image.
There's another page. Okay, yeah, we can just go down, continue going down. And oh yeah, let's go down. There's another view of it. Nice. Okay, this is how it would look at low tide with all the water drained out. So the rendering, the artist didn't quite represent grasses very well. We did chide them about that. But that's where you see that low marsh is going to be the same kind of vegetation you saw in the basins and in the floating dock, the living dock. So there's the water coming in, and then at high tide, there's all that Spartina grass covered. So that is the view at high tide, where you just have the upland vegetation, salt marsh hay, flowering plants like goldenrod and milkweed, Joe Pye weed, some trees. So whatever the tide cycle, it will be a lovely place for people to come visit and have a sense of what was here.
Is there any concern about engaging with that water?
Yes. So there are no intertidal steps at this location. So, in the years that the Newtown Creek Nature Walk over by the water treatment plant has been open, people have had direct access to the water. You can walk down there to the water's edge through these steps that are twice daily covered and uncovered by the tides. And there has never been a problem there, even though the sign that said no swimming has long since rusted away and disappeared. No one seems particularly interested in swimming. So we haven't had a problem. Now, they will have, like, this is the same location where that living dock that you photographed us standing upon. The living dock will stay there, moored just beyond this area of restoration. So folks will have a chance to directly see, what's in that water without having to go down and walk the marsh. But what we're thinking of doing ultimately, and we're going to be putting in a grant proposal for this, is to extend a walkway, a wooden walkway, across the marsh, or maybe just in a loop, so you can walk through the grasses, looking down on them, much as they have along the Hudson River, just south of, maybe 70th Street. And there they've done a lovely job where you can actually walk amongst the grasses. You're on a boardwalk, but the boardwalk extends across the grassland. So ultimately, we'd love to see that happen.
All right. We're at the part of the show where if people who are watching would like to ask questions, they can. The only comment we've gotten in the stream is from somebody trying to sell fame to us. So if you're interested in buying famousness, QC Chelsea F32 or whatever that is, 132 is ready to sell it to you.
I'll give it serious thought.
But anyhow, I guess we'll talk. So you're already kind of doing this. We're talking about the future. So what's next? I mean, you got this money. You're going to try to utilize it for this particular project, and you're already other things. Anything else coming up in the future, either for the Newtown Creek project or even yourself, Dr. Durand? Anything that you're working on in your own?
Well, as this project develops, and it's involving the landscape firm that provided these beautiful renderings, a contractor we worked with that does site assessments, who did a phase 2 environmental site assessment for us. So this contractor is going to be engaged in this project. Our partners for the proposal were the Newtown Creek Alliance. So the proposal is a collaborative project with the Newtown Creek Alliance. And it is going to offer an opportunity as the project proceeds to introduce LaGuardia students to how such a project is realized, the components that go into the project, be a wonderful experience for students in the environmental science capstone. And then once we get to the point of actually planting and choosing the vegetation and selecting organisms, of course, they'll naturally colonize, but we can speed up and enhance the colonization by moving in some ribbed mussel, say, the dominant bivalve of our creek. As we put together a community, then biology students, ecology students will be able to do field projects here. We'll have the first accessible intertidal wetland community for investigation. And this was never available to students before. So it's going to be an opportunity for wonderful collaboration between folks who are teaching general bio, microbio, maybe organic chemistry, in addition to, of course, ecology and environmental science for our majors in the program. So in that sense, I'm very excited to see both educational and environmental restoration opportunities happen here. Then, as I mentioned, we have had for 2 years 26 of these basins stored at the the site of the Newtown Creek Alliance office, but actually is an old Standard Oil headquarters building, an old brick building that's fascinating in itself, um, and has now a rooftop garden. Environmental science students and other students have visited the wonderful rooftop gardens at the Broadway Stages building. So the old Standard Oil building now houses this big producer of movies. The Broadway Stages owns the building, has a good relationship with the Newtown Creek Alliance. So the Newtown Creek Alliance has office space in there. And the bulkhead has been the site where we have built the floating grass installations that really started in a big way in 2018. So it was also the site where I was saying these basins, metal basins, are stored, 26 of them. And we, as I mentioned, have just developed a protocol with waste management for bringing these 26 basins over to the Long Island City side of the creek and bringing the wetland marsh grasses to the hard edge of waste management bulkhead, which is this type of sheet pile bulkhead that you saw in one of the images you took on the creek. So these are the two big projects that will be happening in the next couple of years.
And will they be connected at all with the work that Dr. Porter Morgan and Dr. Mann Hamilton are doing with the President's Society, or is that focused exclusively on the environmental things going on around the physical campus?
Oh, all of these efforts are interwoven in some way and collaborative in some way. So that effort to bring green space to the campus evolved years ago from a proposal. Again, that same environmental benefits proposal environmental benefits grant, my apology, included a proposal to do one element of what President Society Environment is now proposing as a much larger plan. But a key element of that greening of our campus is to allow people access to the shoreline of the tributary of Newtown Creek that comes up behind the C building, and that's Dutch Kills. So President Society Environment and Long Island City Roots, the little community garden across from us on 47th Avenue, we are collaborating in getting our local electeds and city agencies interested in linking our campus to our local ecosystem, which is an estuary ecosystem, and features our estuary, Newtown Creek. Now, it may be that it's easier for them to start on the LaGuardia side, but ultimately the plan is to have a greenway, a walkway to the shore of Newtown Creek. So all of these efforts are interconnected. And one of the collaborators with the Present Society Environment is not only the Long Island City Roots little community garden, but the Newtown Creek Alliance. So everybody's involved with everything. And so very exciting time, very exciting time.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, no. I was just going to say we're starting to run out of time for the show. We have about 3 minutes to say last words and any thank yous you want to make or anything like that. So I wanted to give you the opportunity because we have any last things you want to talk about before we run out of time.
Well, the last thing we can talk about is that students were able to do a study. We were able to do a study of our rib mussel population and discovered that they are wonderful water quality remediators. They draw out the bacteria of our waterway from combined sewage overflow. And we look forward to giving them a wonderful living space in this new habitat that is going to be created at the foot of North Henry Street, which we were just looking at in artistic renderings. And the study of our mussels and which we got published in Marine Pollution Bulletin. That study will continue, and another group of students is already interested in pursuing just that work. So all of this is all about community, communities of faculty and students in collaboration.
It might be fun when we are back physically on campus to take another boat ride, this time with my engineer and some sound equipment, and we can do a little kind of podcast recording if we can't actually stream it live, of a ride on the creek, a little 1 hour, and share, because we've shown pictures, but the sights and, but also the sounds. We can't share the smells, but
yeah,
that's good or
if you can
bad.
get the sounds are wonderful between the crashing of crushed metal and calls of gulls and cormorants.
Right. I should look, because I think I was actually recording, and I didn't even. I think I'm realizing that now. I may have in my little phone memos that I did when I used to record my father, may have recorded some sound. So maybe we can share that another time.
Fantastic.
But it's 1:55, so we're running out of time. I just want to thank you for being on the show, and
thank you. Such a pleasure.
Yeah, and I think we want to check in with you again as you start spending this money and we start seeing this happen. Not to mention, I want to just say that I'd love to get you involved with the folks, Maureen Drennan and Lydia Kahn, who are overseeing the Cameras for Science initiative.
I've been meaning to follow up with that.
Yeah,
I would love to do that.
So we'll get that happening, but that's for another time, another slideshow. So you've been watching What's Going On here on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, and my guest today is the always energetic, never runs out of things to do, Dr. Sarah Durand of the Natural Science Department, who's been on to talk a little bit about the North Henry Street Salt Marsh Restoration Project, which recently received $1.3 million in funding from the Newtown Creek Environmental Benefits Fund. And I want to thank folks for watching. This is our last show for the Spring 1 2021 season. We'll be back at the end of June with our summer shows. So be on the lookout for those announcements. I just want to thank everybody for watching, for listening. And Mr. Pope, great job again today. Please take us out with some more Beatles. Thanks, everybody.